We're live, Dan.
I'm alive.
Yeah, you are barely though. You look good this week. You're like nice and lit, and your camera's clear, so your internet must be working better.
Okay.
Um, Sorry for being a little bit late. We were sitting here chit chatting beforehand and got a little lost track of time, I guess. What have you been up to? I haven't really talked to you much this week.
Yeah, I haven't been doing much. A lot of work.
Yeah.
I got to get out and do some scouting. I got to get out really quick here. I got out and did a little, but right now is prime time here.
Mm-hmm. That's what we were going to talk about tonight. Is hence the name. The most important time of the year is we're going to talk about scouting this time of year and how to go about it. And if you guys have questions about it, leave them in the comments section. We'll try to get to a bunch of them tonight.
Too many people just like they get done hunting and there's like this relaxing period. It's like, oh, I just got to kick back for a little bit. I've been pounding it, and you just waste that important period.
Yeah, I'm probably a little guilty of that because we get done a month earlier than you, and I always think like because I like to shed hunt too, so I'm like if I wait till February, at least there'll be some sheds on the ground, and maybe I'll find sheds. But like the sheds don't really matter that much. So
yeah, sheds are low on my priority list.
Yeah, they are mine too anymore. I mean, I don't think about them too much anymore. I used to like to shed hunt whenever I had like no kids and all the time in the world, to go and just walk around looking for antlers. But yeah, it's that time of year. Like start pounding the woods. You almost need to spend more time right now in the next couple of months than you did during hunting season, looking for stuff, fine tuning spots that you screwed up on during the deer season. You guys got any snow right now?
No. Mm-mm. We had an ice storm this morning.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was pretty slippery out.
Does snow ever deter you from like? Do you wait till snow's off the ground to scout ever?
Yeah, I mean, I'll scout in the snow, but man, it's your scouting changes because you're not going to be seeing beds correctly and stuff. So I'm not going to like do something that I'm really worried about. I got to scout this piece or something important here. I'm probably going to go look at a property or something in the snow if I got free time. But my priorities change because under the snow, when the snow's gone, all the beds are saved from fall, even if it didn't snow. I mean, you have all the sign from November is still there. A lot of guys mistakenly think that when we're out looking at beds and stuff, we're looking at beds where deer are bedding now, and we're not. We're looking at where they were bedding back in November, October, September, and making a game plan. Those bedding areas change so frequently that if you're looking at beds in snow, like a bed on the snow, it's very likely that that's a bedding area now, but it's not a bedding area in fall. I mean, sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. But I would really like to see the sign without the snow to be sure.
Yeah.
One thing I can do in snow, though, is I can find primary bedding areas where they bed all year or overlook spots by following tracks, because the tracks will take you to places that even you're missing or you're forgetting about. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If you find a big buck track, it's never not educational to follow it.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I do in the snow is I like to follow them around a little bit. But I'm really concentrating on the stuff as soon as snow melts and in between snows. But what one of the big advantages of right now, though, at least here, is all the water's frozen. That ain't going to last long.
Yeah.
I mean, we get a week of 60, 70-degree weather, which can pop up anytime. And all of a sudden you're falling through and stuff, and I can't cross ice and stuff. And there's a lot of places that I scout that are so isolated that they're very, very hard to get to. But right now I can walk across open water. I can walk across miry and mud. I can walk across canals just like it's nothing. And I can get into these things really easy, scout around, and see if it's worth the problem of hauling a canoe a half mile across land, going across canal, because I might do that during the fall and get back there and find out, hell, the deer don't even go that deep. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But this time of the year, I can go back with the ice and get into those spots. In a month or so, I'll still be scouting and I'll still be finding great spots, but I won't be doing those spots because those spots are going to be very hard to get to. You know what I'm saying? Right now, with the ice a foot thick, I can just walk right to those spots.
Yeah. Is it a good time though? Like if you're out there right now with the snow on the ground, we don't get snow here. I mean, we do, but not like you guys do. I mean, is it good to note those? I mean, because your guys' season just got out.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, I guess like the sign would be relevant to like a late season hunt for you.
Well, it can be, yeah. Mm-hmm. Once
Yeah.
late season comes, they kind of stay in the same areas. However, they shift for food, and that's one of the big things. Is it's really food based, and late season hunting, if you do a lot of it, what you find is these deer are grouped up. They're not always in the same area. You know what I mean? They could be over here one year, the next year they're over here because a food source might be better one year to the next. So you're scouting this time of the year is relative, but it's like this. I mean, you find bedding areas even in the snow. Like, see, that's what you have. You have snow right now. If you're going to scout, you're going to be in the snow. So you find these bedding areas. It's still not bad info because when you see sign in the area, and you say, okay, there's a buck living in here somewhere. If you've scouted that at all, at least that's going to give you a starting point. They could be bedding here, or they could be bedding there. And I have had plenty of deer where it's a primary bedding area where they do bed there periodically all year, or they bed there at 2 or 3 different time periods. And sometimes the primary bedding areas are the easy ones to find in the snow because primary bedding areas where they bed all year always have good cover. And bedding really gets reduced in snow and in winter because that's the time period that they have the least amount of cover. So the little spots that are thick enough to have cover right now are holding all the deer. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So can we go over like, and this may be a long episode, but like, how do you this time of year? How do you decipher like what you're going to set early season versus the rut? And then obviously we just talked about late season, but like, what would key you in on a spot that you're like, okay, this is going to be the place I set, the last week of September and early October.
For
Versus
me, that's usually determined while I'm scouting. I don't determine that before I go out, unless, let's say, the only way I would determine that before I went out scouting is, say I've got some intel from hunting season. I was seeing a deer at a specific time, and I'm going to go in and scout that deer. And I do a lot of that. So just a lot of you probably watched my last hunt of the season where I had that buck come in but catch my wind. Well, definitely I'm going to go out there and find out where that buck was coming from. And I got busted in the same exact scenario in the same exact spot from a buck earlier this year by trying to push that limit, and one from last year. So I know that there's bucks that come in that way periodically, late season and in rut. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to scout that area where that deer came from, find the bedding, and find a place I can get in there where I don't have the wind swirl. So that's a specific spot I'm going to scout for a certain time period because I've got intel of when the deer are there. But for the most part, most of my spring scouting, I'm going to go in there and I'm going to find these bedding areas by looking in an area where deer should be. And then I'm going to put on my detective hat. I'm going to walk around and look at the bedding area and say, okay, this is the time of the year the deer are here. This is why they're here. This is how they're using it. This is the wind they're using it on. This is the type of cover they got to have. I'm going to look around at the trees and go, okay, they're not bedding in this spot in when there's no leaves. They're bedding here at this time of the period. These rubs are from early season. These rubs are from late season. There's no tracks or sign now, but I can faintly see the beds, meaning they're really old. I'm going to look at the clues that the bedding area gives me and make a determination or a best guess on when I think the buck I'm hunting is using that spot at the time I'm scouting. And that's going to go into my notes. And I'm going to find all these spots. And then after I'm done with scouting season, then I'm going to be like, when early season comes, I'm going to be glassing, shining, trying to put the pieces together, narrowing the focus. but now I know the bedding areas in these spots, and maybe I see a deer in an area. Okay, now this buck is in this area. These spots are scouted. Now I'm going to start focusing on those at these time periods based on what I scouted. So it's kind of like the scouting is more of the first phase, but it can be secondary too. I mean, if you've seen something in there during the season or whatever.
Yeah. What about new spot then? Like, are you going to hit? How many new spots are you going to hit this year? I know it's probably getting old.
Mostly new spots. I mean, once I scout a spot, I pretty much know it. So
Yeah.
there will be a few spots I tweak where I saw something that's got my interest. Something didn't work out on a hunt, and I need to, figure out a new location. But those are quick and easy. That's something I do after work. Run out real quick, check out that scenario because I already know the woods, right?
Yeah.
Almost, 90% of my scouting is new spots. So I'm always looking at new areas, new spots, new properties. Then I'm going in and the first thing I'm doing is I'm looking at a map of the place. I'm driving by and looking at it. Some of them I'll skip right over. You look at them and you're like, no, there ain't enough cover there. There ain't enough room. There's going to be people everywhere. You just skip it. Some of them I'm going to look at it and go, okay, if there's deer in here, they're going to be in these pockets for sure. And I'll go straight to those pockets. If there's no deer sign there, I'm out of there. On to the next property. I'm not going to waste my time. If there's not deer where they're supposed to be, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Places that got the cover, the terrain, and the overlook type of scenario. Yeah, I mean, you might get into one and there's a whole bunch of hunter sign. You're like, well, that's why they're not here. So I'll go look at this other spot too. But if you go look at that and there's same thing, you might want to get out of there. But for the most part, most of these properties I'm looking at, if I decide to look at it, I'm looking at 10% of the property. And I'm starting out with like looking at 2%. I'm going in and really kind of spot checking, making sure that there's something in there I want to hunt. All big bucks leave rubs. So if there's no big high rubs, there's no big bucks. There's no mature bucks in there. There should at least be some, rubs off of like 3-year-old animals if you're expecting there to be mature animals this year. You know what I'm saying? So
yeah.
I'm going to go in there and I'm going to look at the sign real quick. If I see the sign I want, I'm going to start fine tuning and really start looking a little closer. But I'm not covering big open woods. I'm not covering oak flats. I'm not going, looking at field edges. I'm not going to go walk in this field because it looks like it might have sheds in it because, maybe it's cut corn or something. There could be sheds over there and spend an hour in there. You got to remember, if you want to kill deer, the thing that's going to put them on the wall is having the spots nailed down. And I do most of that in springtime. So if you've got 3 or 4 weekends, and this is for a hardcore guy, most guys don't have that.
Right.
But you got 3 or 4 weekends to scout. If you're wasting 2 of those weekends looking in cornfields for sheds, you're not going to have the number of spots you need to kill giant bucks that fall. You know what I mean? You might get lucky, you might not. But really, the luck that I create for myself comes from creating it. And it's created by really scouting hard and finding new spots constantly. And I'm constantly losing spots. Deer are constantly getting shot or shifting around, or there ain't a deer in an area one year versus the next. My area gets a lot of pressure. A lot of guys are going to take and they're going to do their scouting on one property, the property they like. And they never leave it. They go out and they tweak it and they tweak it and they move around a little bit, scout a little more, but they don't want to leave that property. And then you got another guy, and I see these guys all the time, that they scout that property, they learn it well, and they still want to scout. So they go scout this property, but they never hunt it. They always go back to their trademark spots or trademark trees and their places where they've always hunted, where they feel comfortable. And being comfortable doesn't kill giant bucks. It kills average bucks. You got to put yourself into places, I can't stress it enough. I mean, I hunt a lot of the spots that I've hunted in previous years, more so than I hunt new spots. But it's almost always a new spot if it's a real big buck that I shoot, like an older age class. The old spots that I go to periodically, that's where you get your 2 and 3 year old nice, Pope and Young bucks. The monsters come from really hunting them down and killing them. You know what I mean?
Yeah. what would you say to like a lot of people set up and hunt over sign that's made at night? Like most deer sign is made at night. Like what clues you in on like okay this is an area that there's a lot of sign and this is a place where this deer is getting to during the daylight hours.
Let's put that in perspective. A deer spends 95% of its time moving at nighttime. And the 5% of time that it moves in daylight, it's pretty paranoid because that's the time it gets hunted. So most sign is put down at night. So the only sign that turns me on is sign coming in or out of potential bedding. It has to look like bedding to me. It has to look like bedding cover. It has to be a point going into a marsh. It has to be a coming off of a leeward side of a hill. It has to have some reason that a buck would be bedding there. And then I'm going to find those beds and relate it to that cover in the springtime, right?
Yeah.
If it was fall, then you're taking a guess, and that's what most people are doing. But you go out into the woods, you walk out in those open woods, you find giant rubs and stuff all over the place, and sign, guys hunting right over the top of it. And they could get lucky. Every now and then, one of the big bucks moves in daylight. And every now and then, somebody kills one. But if you go and you hunt based on luck, hunting sign, you're going to have the same success as everybody else because everybody is hunting over those rub lines. Everybody's hunting over those scrapes. There's a big buck I was hunting this fall that reappeared. I was hunting this buck up until 2 years ago, and I thought he was dead. He's got to be pretty old. But he reappeared. He's got a very unique rack. I know it's him. I got a picture of him, and then I ran into him in the woods. Well, for whatever reason, this one particular area of the woods, he just tore up this year with scrapes and rubs and stuff, and I ran into him at one of the scrapes in the dark coming out one night. And after that, I couldn't believe how many tree stands I found in that open woods. Nowhere's near any kind of cover. Wherever you had a rub or a scrape or whatever, there was like those pins you stick in the tree that glow or whatever when you hit them with light all over the place. There was ribbons. There was those stupid scent things hanging in branches over all the scrapes and stuff.
Yeah.
In the middle of an open hardwoods. I mean, it's like people just can't walk past that kind of sign.
Oh,
but almost all that sign is made at night.
I hunted in a spot this year in October, and I was way back in there. I hunted it was in the morning. It took me like an hour to get out of the place, and I get back to the road, and there's two like middle-aged guys, older, like between mine and your age, and they're sitting on their tailgate, and I walked up to them and I was, talked to him for a second, and the one that they both had stands just not too far from the parking lot in the woods, and the one guy was just like, "Man, I put my scent wick out and nothing that came in." He just was like baffled that it didn't work. He's like, I don't know what to do now. I'm like, yeah, well,
that didn't work. Just give up.
Yeah. But it's funny you say that because like it is like I see those things everywhere and just yeah.
Yeah, if you watch the marketing, I mean, the marketing just tells you, you put this out, you're going to kill giant bucks. Yeah. They're going to come running in. They can't resist it. And literally, you see when a doe goes in the heat, and you're actually fortunate enough to be around, the amount of bucks that show up from downwind is crazy. I mean, that one in Kansas this year, I mean, there was 10 bucks chasing her. It was crazy. And I mean, that's not an area that had a lot of deer. They came from everywhere. And if those scent wicks really worked, all you'd have to do is put your little Tinks bottle on the upwind side of any marsh or swamp, and every buck that's downwind would come in. You just get the tree really high. And it would work. But it don't work. It's because you cannot mimic it on a live deer. Those deer's sense of smell is way too good. You can, on occasion, trick a deer that's in the exact right mood at the exact right time, but you're probably spooking more than you're attracting.
Yeah. I think that stuff doesn't work is because your scent profile is mixed in with it. Like, you know what I mean? You're messing with it. You're sitting in the stand next to it. Like, it just doesn't work that way. That it's not how they operate.
I just think the smell of it changes immediately when you take it away from it. That's what I think.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It was just funny to me. I told him like I don't think that stuff works very good around here is what I told him. When we were hunting public land, just um,
When I was a kid, everybody would buy urine and pour it all over their boots. It was just
yeah,
like I knew even back then that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard of. You know,
yeah,
even even they'd make it so strong that they'd be like it'd block a deer's nose or whatever, and all it would
mm-hmm.
do is like exaggerate your smell because they're gonna notice that. You know what I mean? It's like you put a bigger target on yourself. Not that I even think that matters because I think you get upwind of a deer, I don't care what you do, how clean you are, or what, they're gonna smell you.
Yeah.
But
Do you think some of that stuff works on low pressure deer?
sure, and it'll work on deer that haven't experienced danger as much. It'll work
Yeah,
more. So, I mean, if you went into a game farm where you feed deer with apples, and you went upwind with some scent thing, he'd come over and check it out. He's got
yeah,
nothing to fear. He's never had anything to fear. It's the same thing like when I hunt public marshes and public woods and stuff that have high pressure. I mean, 1.5-year-old bucks are like shooting a 5-year-old when you go to the ranch in Iowa.
yeah,
It really is. I mean, it's like they're mature bucks. I mean, you can shoot at them and miss, and they come walking over and go, "Why'd you do that?" And you shoot them again. It's crazy versus the wild deer. And somewhere in between the back 40, where it doesn't have as much pressure, but it's still got a little pressure, there's somewhere in between. Deer they seem to learn danger. You know what I mean? But not only that, but I think they're taught by their mom. So there's a generational learn that, on the public land deer that's different than a generational deer in a managed area,
mm-hmm.
Unless the two areas are next to each other.
Yeah. I had a podcast on my channel with my buddy Mike, who he doesn't know anything about like what we do really. He's a very wealthy man. He has his own properties he's bought and stuff. And he has some in Ohio and he has some out west, like in Iowa, and he has one in Michigan too, and then in Indiana. And that's what he said. He's like, I can use like nose jammer and whatnot out west, and he's like, I think it kind of works. But he said, I go to my Ohio farm, and they do not. I mean, you cannot get away with anything there. And it's like he's like, I think where you're at depends on how your tactics can work or not work, or you got to change it up. I'm like, probably. I mean, you got on.
I don't think you're fooling those deer out west either. I think they're just
they're
dumb people, right?
Yeah, that's what he was getting at. He's like, you can fool them, like they'll come into certain things. And I know when I was in Iowa, like I never rattle anything in Indiana. Like very rarely does that. I think I've rattled one deer in just like a decent 6-pointer in Indiana, and out there every time I like tickled antlers together, something came in. Yeah. It's just funny. It's crazy how drastically different the whitetails are as far as their behavior throughout the country. I mean, they're different, but they're not, right? They're still the same animal, but their life experience makes them much different. No different humans, though, I guess, right?
You got to remember these deer that I shoot out here, when they're 6 or 7 years old, the ones that we skin ourselves and clean ourselves, there are very, very few you don't find projectiles in.
Yeah.
That you don't find broadheads in them, holes in them, wounds in them. These deer go through so much to get to be that age where they just don't experience that in these other properties. I mean, you even look at like how the Drury, Lakoski type people hunt. They'll tell you, stay out of the woods, man. We hunt the field edges. We, lure them out, and we make them accustomed to us, and man, try that around here.
Yeah.
You better go in and kill them. And I always wondered to myself, because even there, deer do get educated. And a 6 or 7 year old deer is smart everywhere, no matter what we say. Maybe they're dumber there, based on experiences, but they're still a smart animal. They still know they're being hunted. Getting them to walk into a field edge, in open daylight, even there is tough. So you wonder how many of their target deer they don't kill because they just won't go in the woods,
I've also noticed that just watching shows every now and again, like they shoot a ton of them like late season when they have to come out to a field.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? where it's like they're like forced to go eat somewhere and they go to their, you know, cornfield that they just bush hogged or something.
Right. It's just like a giant bait pile. It's either corn or it's turnips, or
Yeah.
those deer got to have, and there's nothing in the open woods that they have, and
Yeah. Or they catch them first thing in the year, you know, like whenever they're in their summer patterns or haven't
right.
been hunted at all. But you just don't see them very often. I mean, I guess I'm sure in the rut that happens, but it just seems like I see a lot of them like shot with the muzzleloader during late season.
Oh yeah.
But you mess around with your trail cameras right now at all?
I've been pulling them. They're still getting pictures. I got about half of them are still out, but I put out 6 of them this year in various spots to get an idea of timing, what was going on there throughout the year. One of them I just got a trespasser on because it's on Kurt's property. I posted a picture of him. You probably saw that.
I saw that, yeah.
Yeah. I'm surprised nobody figured out who it was yet. Not that I do anything. I just tell them to stay off. But
yeah.
But I did get a bachelor group of bucks the other day. I don't know how many came through. The camera takes a picture every 2 minutes. And I had 3 pics, in 6 minutes.
Yeah.
One buck after another. And the middle one was shed. The other 2 had antlers. I thought that was kind of cool. Because that camera never had bucks on it all year. It would have a buck randomly every now and then. It was put in a doe bedding area just to see what was going to happen. And all little bucks. And it's real close to where I was hunting big bucks. So it's kind of interesting.
Do you think I'm just reading comments and kind of going off them a little bit just to answer some questions for you guys. But like, do you think putting pressure on deer this time of year when the winter's hard is bad for them? Or do you think just one trip into the woods is hurting anything?
I don't think you're bothering a thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
I think anytime you go into a bedding area that gets very little human intrusion, when you're actually in the bedding area, you do damage. But if you're going in there when there's no deer there, which is most of the case now, even if you kick them out, occasionally a coyote goes through. Occasionally a shed hunter goes through there. There's no place nobody walks right now. So my point would be that if you do go into a bedding area, go in, get your intel, get out. Don't go there every weekend and check it out for a month. I mean, go in there as few times as possible. Figure out your tree. I like to go in there one time. Really figure out the area, figure out my tree, and get out and not come back until hunting season.
How important is like finding that specific bed for you, Dan? Like you see a lot of guys ask about bedding areas and I can't find a specific bed in my area. I know where the bedding area is, but I can't find a buck bed. Like how important is that for you? And do guys harp on that too much, you think?
A little of all of it.
Yeah.
Certain terrains in areas, it's really, really hard to find the actual beds. Your area is kind of like that.
Yeah.
It's more rolling hills. And those beds shift around a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Where if you had like that military crest and steeper hills, you'd have locked down beds you could see really well. And it's not getting bedded any more than the rounded hill. It's just that the one, they bed in the exact spot. The other one, they shift based on the wind up and down the hill. And the wind speed, the angle, with a military crest, they bed right on that crest. So the beds are worn in. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But anywho, all you really have to do is know where they're bedding. I think finding the beds and looking at them is really important when you're starting out, because that's how you figure out how close you can be. You start to have you get your relative distance and stuff. But once you have that down, like I always say, you get in the bed, you look out from the bed, and you think, how far can that deer see? What can he smell? What can he hear? How far can he sense you? And you look at that furthest tree you can see, and you're like, okay, I got to be beyond that. And you go to that down the deer trail, and you set up 20, 30 yards behind that, right? So after a while, you don't need that bed anymore, right? Because you can just look at it and okay, the beds are going to be in that crap. They're going to be right there. And I can see where that spot is. I need to back up, right? So after a while, once you understand terrain, because all bedding is based on terrain. It's based on terrain and cover. So once you understand how they bed, it repeats no matter where you go. You go to Texas, you go to Indiana, you go to to New York, bedding is in the same spots. It's all relative. Now, where it changes is like I go to Iowa and I'll find beds where I wouldn't find a jackrabbit in Wisconsin, but that is the best terrain there in an open terrain, you know, an open forest,
Yeah.
right? So, but you have to be able to start to look at the woods and understand how bucks bed and how to use the terrain. And once you can see it like a deer, it just becomes natural. I'll walk into woods and set up and I'll be like, okay, the deer's going to come from right there. And he will. If a deer comes in, that's where he's coming from.
Mm-hmm.
And you get that way by looking at a lot of beds. But you do not have to see the beds. You don't have to actually walk over and physically look at it. But it really does help somebody new at this, because it really starts to get you to form that needed perception of the forest and the bedding cover and the distance and stuff. You got to start that way in order to get good at it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So there was a question about like spot preparation. Do you do any of that? Like, I know some guys will go in and actually like prep a location this time of year. I guess especially if you're on private land, you could really set things up. But like, is this the time of the year when you would do something like that, or are you waiting a little bit until some closer to deer season? Obviously, public land, you got rules and regulations you got to follow. But
yeah, I usually I got a big frame pack. I put 2 chainsaws in and a can of gas and
pole saw.
yeah, pole saw. And, I will where I can get away with it, I'll take a limb or 2 out if they're in the way or a branch at this time of the year. I don't necessarily want to be doing that in the fall.
Yeah.
But I don't do very much. The main reason is, number one, it's a lot of the time it's illegal. You can cut certain things like invasive species. You can cut up to 1-inch branches on a tree that you're hunting out of. But I think you actually have to be hunting out of it. I don't think you can do it like pre-season legally.
Right.
I think you can here, and don't quote me on this, check your laws, but here I believe you can cut dead branches. You know, if they're not living, I believe you can cut them early. But when I do trim when I hunt, what I prefer is a pruning snippers because they don't make noise.
Yeah.
And I usually just do it in the tree around me. So a lot of it is picking a tree or trees where I can see I have clear shooting. I can go up to the deer trails and look back at the tree and see where I have shooting and stuff and leave it alone. So one of the big reasons I don't like to trim is because other people notice it. And if you have nice shooting lanes, they're going to hunt there.
Yeah.
So I try to not have good shooting lanes or have it be obvious where I'm hunting. If I come out of an area and somebody sees me come out of there and they go in to see where I'm hunting, they'll never figure it out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've heard a dozen people like in Michigan tell me they found like a Johnny Eberhart because he has taught over all these years about how he preps locations and stuff in the off season, and like people, I mean, I've had a ton of people tell me they know like a spot he's at because of that, and I'm like, oh, that's one downfall of doing that for sure. Is that people know where you're hunting at, and if you're a guy like you, there's going to be people there, if they know you're hunting there.
Yeah, and even if it's not me, I mean, if it's just a general spot that's good, there's a trail there or stuff, and you clear out a spot to hunt. Expect people to hunt there. It's public land.
Yeah. I don't hardly ever prep a tree this time of year. I mean, on public land specifically. But in the hills here, you don't do much tree prepping. Like it's pretty open. You know what I mean? Like, I don't have to worry about it. My worry usually like you either have to get really high or there's all kinds of obstacles you got to overcome in the hills just because of the trees are so straight, and you got those like chestnut oaks and trees like that where there's not a lot of cover, but carry more sticks.
Right. There's really an art to picking your trees too. I mean, it's like a lot of times when I'm scouting, I find the tree I got to be in. But a lot of times there's more than one tree I could be in. And a lot of times there's an area. And what I mean by that is it's going to be based on the wind. It's going to be based on what's going on. You know, if some of the trails shift around, which one's being used hot now. So sometimes, even though I have the area pretty pinned down from scouting, I really don't have the tree locked down, and I'm going to come in there and I'm going to scout in and hunt based on circling the downwind side of that bedding area and up a trail or whatever, and looking at, you know, where these deer are coming through. And there's also the reusable setup. And what I mean by that is there's some of these spots, not a lot of them, obviously the minority, but there's some spots that based on terrain or the way you come into them, you can come in from a direction where you keep a canal or a fallen tree or some obstacle, thick fence line in between you and the trail these deer use in the bedding area, and shoot over your obstacle and have the wind in your face. And those spots, if the deer's on the other side of that obstacle and he never comes on your side, he never knows you were there. Mm-hmm. And you could hunt that spot a couple times and not really burn it out.
I was reading a Barry Wenzel book. It's been a couple months ago now, but you ever move stuff around to kind of like funnel the deer into certain areas?
I have. It's kind of mediocre works. Yeah, I've had it work, but usually if it works the day you move it. Deer just have a way of finding a way to go where they want to.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it seems like you could cut a tree down over a trail and they'll make a path through the branches, you know, instead of following the obvious trail. But what I have done is, like, when I hunt, there's been a few times that I can remember where I have many trails around me, but where I have to set up the tree I have to get into that has the cover I need, that has the wind I need. And a lot of times people don't realize it can be within 5 yards of another tree. That's the tree you got to be in, just because of how everything works. But you get in that tree, and a lot of times you'll have one trail that comes right up on you and passes you at like 5 yards or something, or right at the base of your tree or something. And you can't have that deer walk straight into you and get underneath you. And the reason you take that tree rather than 10 yards off is because there's another trail over there. There's another trail over there. In order to hit all of them, you have to be where you're at. And it's pot luck whether he comes down the trail you're on, right?
Yeah.
There's several trails coming out of this bedding area, say, right? So what I'll do is I'll clip a branch or find a dead one or something, and I won't touch the brushy end of it. I'll just touch the thicker end, and I'll lay it in or on the trail up against a tree or something to make the deer walk around it and give me a broadside shot. I've had that work. Yeah. But you don't want to get your scent on the spot where he's got to walk around it. You want to have it behind it. And he's going to get your scent eventually anyways if he walks up the trail straight up to you, right? But now at least he's going to turn broadside before he gets to you. And you put it out about 10, 15 yards in front of you so you have a spot where you can shoot him. You know, I've done that. But anytime I try to block a trail to make him use a different trail at a later date, that never seems to work. For me.
Barry, yeah, Barry was talking about doing that. And, of course, you know, he's a little longer in the tooth now, but he has to use ladder stands. And he didn't like to get high. So he was talking like he was this time of year he goes to like Menards or wherever and buys old Christmas trees, you know, that people and he'll tie them up around him so he has some cover, because those ladder stands are just fixed, right? Like they only go 15 feet or 12 feet or whatever the ladder stand is. And he was saying that he kind of ties all that stuff up this time of year and gets it ready. I'm like, well, that's a pretty good idea if you're you know, forced to do that. So obviously that has worked for those guys. So, yeah, I was wondering, it just seemed like something maybe you do is the limb thing, or, you know, trying to manipulate their movements a little bit. If you got to have if you don't have a good tree to try to get them closer to you.
Yeah. I mean, you know, there's some people too that, you know, you got to be a little leery of everything you see. I mean, I think a lot of people, and I'm not saying this about Barry. I like Barry a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking more about other people that I don't want to name, but they seem like, and Barry is not like this. So again, this is not about Barry.
Yeah, right.
But a lot of people in like make a living or a business out of hunting, I feel like they have to have fresh content constantly.
Mm-hmm.
And they start just kind of trying to create crap.
Yeah.
And you have your land managers that create bedding areas, and oh my god, dude, some of these guys are famous, and I've gone and scouted properties after them, and they're like, what the hell was this guy thinking? He just like ruined this hillside, and there's no deer going to bed here that's worth a crap.
Yeah.
Like digging a flat spot on a hill for a deer to bed there. A mature buck is not going to bed in that spot. A mature buck picks his bed for an exact reason in an exact spot because of the way the wind flows that you can't tell with your nose.
Yeah.
And you're not going to create the spot that buck bedded. You could get away with it in some scenarios, like if you made a high spot in cattails where it's otherwise underwater, you could create something there. Might take a year or two before they bed there, and the thing is with those like creating beds, if you bare dirt, deer will bed there for sure. Anytime you disturb the dirt, there's something about it, they'll come lay there.
Yeah.
But once that dirt is no longer disturbed and it becomes just a regular spot, they're done. And it's not going to be mature bucks, in my opinion, that go use human-made beds.
Yeah.
You can make a bedding area by thickening up a leeward side, cutting down some trees, maybe they'll bed behind them and stuff, but you ain't going to make the exact beds. You know what I mean?
Right.
But a lot of these people, try to create stuff like, if you do this to the tree, if you do this to the trail, if you do this, you know what? Just hunt deer, man. That's what it's about. It's not about manipulating them. It's not about tricking them. It's not about putting some magic scent out there or whatever. It's about, to me anyways, it is about the one-on-one battle with a mature buck on his turf. You're hunting him. He's doing his thing. And if you're that good, you can go in and kill him and guess where he's going to be. Not try to manipulate him, force him to make a snow fence where he has to go through a little funnel. Guys do that.
Oh yeah.
And it's like, are you even hunting anymore? What are you doing? You just got to kill a deer that bad.
Yep. People were asking about like rubs and scrapes, Dan, and when you hunt over them, and if you've had a success hunting over them, like stuff you found this time of year.
Yeah, I don't necessarily hunt over rubs and scrapes, but occasionally there's rubs and scrapes where I set up. So my setup is basically going to be as close to bedding as possible in almost all scenarios, even in rut. So if there happens to be rubs and scrapes there, hey, awesome, but not necessarily. The best scrape scenario I've ever hunted is when there's two, or like you got a bedding area, and you might have within this area two kind of areas where they bed, and each one holds a buck, right? And there's trails that come out of both of them, and they meet at a spot before they go on to whatever they're doing. And in that spot where they meet, there's a scrape, like a primary type scrape. And that scrape will be within 100 yards of the bedding areas. That type of scenario, which is kind of hard to find, but occasionally you find it, has killed a couple of my very, very biggest whitetails. The 400-pound slob came on a situation like that. That giant 11-pointer, picture of me when I'm really young, where it's really wide and the massive antlers. Mm-hmm. That one came from that situation. And those scrapes are way different than rut scrapes. They'll be there in September. They'll be there towards the end of August. Whenever that deer's bedding there, they'll make those scrapes will be there. That scenario has worked really well for me. Regular scrapes have not worked all that well. A lot of times when people are hunting primary scrapes, they got multiple bucks coming in. They don't even know that that's actually close to bedding, and that's exactly the scenario that they have. I've had that where I found a scrape, and me and a buddy both killed 9-pointers on that scrape a week apart from each other. This is back in like 80s,
Yeah.
But literally, it was when you got down to it, there was a bedding area 100 yards each direction from this, and that's where they were coming from to go to the scrape before going off to the fields, on the edge of this cover. And If you're just hunting scrape lines out in the open woods or on a field edge or something, good luck. That's what everybody does. You're gonna have the same result. But it really, what it boils down to is as simple as it all revolves around bedding. Mature bucks do not run around middle of the day very often. They do occasionally, or nobody'd kill them, right? But for the most part, there's a little window of movement between the bed and where they're going that they move in daylight. So you got to get within that movement window. So what the rubs and scrapes do is they give me, okay, there's one here I want to hunt. Where's he coming from? Where's he bedding? Sometimes they give me a direction of travel. Sometimes I can follow them right to a bedding area. Sometimes I can't. Sometimes they're coming out of a bedding area telling me that that deer was using that bedding area or is using that bedding area now. And then I'll set up on it. But I'm not setting up in any of that kind of scenario out in open woods or just because I found a cluster of rubs or something like that. A lot of times, like clusters, everybody's on this cluster kick now. But a lot of times these clusters are just a certain type of tree, like say poplar, that smooth bark whitish tree, poplar. Yep. Deer love those trees. They love the aroma. They love the leaves. It's like their favorite tree. So if they find a patch of those, they're going to rub it every time they come by. So you'll find a patch of those poplars out in the marsh, and every one of these trees is ripped up, and you're like, oh my gosh, there's 100 rubs in here. There's got to be a giant buck here all the time. There ain't no a giant buck there any more than 500 yards over where there's no rubs. It's just that there's a type of rubs in the trees that they like to rub. You know what I mean? You still got to relate to bedding. Where are they coming from? Where are they going? Don't get caught up in the sign looks so big and so huge, I have to hunt here.
What about like you ever mess with tarsal glands? Someone was asking about tarsal glands versus like your synthetic stuff or your tinks or whatever.
No.
Yeah.
I'm not into any of that stuff. I think if you get the deer in the right mood, and it's the right deer, the right day, you can trick them.
Yeah.
And I think for the most part, you're probably spooking deer. If you're messing around with the tarsal gland, no matter what, even if you're wearing rubber gloves, you're getting your scent on it, the stuff that's floating off of you. It's going to be tainted. It's not going to be like it smells like when it's on a living deer.
Yeah. Doesn't work that way.
Right.
Tim is talking about the old skunk scent and the fox scent. I've heard some old timers just swear by skunk scent.
I'll tell you, I was think it was either 1983 or 1984.
Yeah.
I was in high school, and for Christmas, my mom would always buy me hunting stuff. I think it was my mom. It could have been a brother or something too. I don't know. But somebody bought me the original skunk scent that was coming out then, because that was the big rage back then. Magazines were writing articles about it. And it was a synthetic scent. And it was like some of the first synthetics to come out. And what it was you had two bottles, and they were chemical. And when you mixed them, it was the same stuff that comes out of a skunk, but it was genetically made or something in a factory, right? So it had a light odor, but when you mix 3 drops from each bottle, it smelled like a skunk spray. And you're supposed to take this and put it around your stand so when deer were downwind of you, they wouldn't smell you, which didn't work because deer would smell skunk and you. Not to mention, skunk is an alarm scent.
Mm-hmm.
Skunks spray when they're in danger, when they're scared. It's an alarm scent. Yeah. But even if a deer didn't understand that, let's say, it's going to smell the skunk and you. That's not only my opinion, that's kind of scientifically proved. But anywho, I got this stuff for Christmas. So what am I going to do with it? So I took it to school, and I took 3 drops from each dropper, and I put them in the hallway on the stairs.
Yeah.
And went to class, and the whole building smelled like skunk spray. It smelled like skunk spray. And they actually had to send everybody home because they couldn't figure out where it was coming from. And it smelled so bad. And some kids were puking. And so I thought this was great. So they cleaned up the school, and they let us go back to school. So I did it again in a different hallway and did a little more. and they had to send us all home again. And so the next day I was going to come in and I was going to pour both bottles together and into a balloon and throw it into the venting system, into the fans. And before I could do that, I don't know if they set up a camera or whatever, but they caught me. I was in study hall and they came in there, and the vice principal and the principal grabbed me out of my chair, dragged me in the hall, ripped over my pocket. They knew right where it was. I didn't tell anybody I did it.
They must have saw you on video or something.
Yeah, got suspended.
Oh man. Yeah. I've heard more than one old timer tell me about, like, talk about skunk spray on podcasts and just stuff. Like, you get an old timer on a podcast, they talk about their skunk scent.
Well,
So
I
that
just told you
must
the
have been a
greatest
big thing back in the day.
for any of you kids that are still in school. I just told you the greatest use for it.
Yeah.
I'm just like this great role model for kids, right?
Oh yeah, that's
I'm going to get some hate mail. I know it.
Perfect thing to use it for. Oh man, I think I've heard you tell that story before, so I kind of was teeing you up for that. Bow Hunter had a question. He says, "Here, I'll put it up here." He says, "Do you find when islands surrounded by moving water starts to freeze, the deer don't go there anymore?"
Yeah, to some degree. It depends on the area. So, like, moving or not, if you get into marshes and swamps and they got water in them, there's like a time period where those deer don't want to go in there. They don't like it when their hooves are breaking through. You know what I mean? And they're cutting their legs or something. There's like a certain amount of ice they don't like. And they start to just bed right on the edges of the ice, more out to, where the does and the smaller deer used to bed, right? But what I find is certain areas with a lot of pressure or just certain deer they go out there no matter what, that they know that those cattails are safe. But there tends to be a lot less deer in the swamps at certain time periods. And then there seems to be a time period when they return. You know what I mean? And a lot of times that's like after scouting, there'll be some deer back there year round, but there's going to be some that do vacate for sure.
That might be something we can talk about for just a minute here is water. Because if you guys are going scouting new places that have water, like where do you draw the limit on water, and like deer like this amount of water and don't, like lakes and rivers, and like what are they going to cross and not cross and feel comfortable with?
I find like walkable water when it gets to be like if it starts virgin waist deep, you start getting less and less deer.
Yeah,
but I have seen certain bucks swim across deep water.
Yeah,
where you literally have to swim for short distances. I remember a guy, his daughter shot this really big buck and he couldn't find it. And he asked me for help. And she had gut shot it and they tracked it too soon and kicked it up. And then they backed off and they knew it was dead, but couldn't find it. So I came in there and started grid searching. I asked them where they looked. And they had looked everywhere. They went through everything. They got a big group of guys. And they went every 6 feet or whatever. And I was looking around. And I was like, man, the only thing that stood out where I was standing was there's this big pond that was like 12 feet deep. And there was a little island in the middle of this pond. It was a man-made pond. And the island was, the size of 2 vans if you parked them next to each other. It was really small but brushy. And I was like, I wonder if it could have got onto that island, but the water was real deep. And I was looking and I could see some antlers sticking up. And I was like, there it is. That's the buck. And I remember this guy's like, it can't be. There's no way it got out there. And I literally, it was like, I think it was like mid or late November. And there was a little bit of ice. And I stripped down and swam to that island because I was so convinced that it was a buck. Grabbed that buck by the antlers and swam it back. But that was her buck. And when I got out there, there was a bed in the middle of that island that was worn to the dirt. And that water was over my head deep.
Jeez.
But that is the exception. But I have seen like on the Wisconsin River, I've seen some of those islands that are public up there when you get into the driftless area.
Yeah.
Man, they got some bucks on them. And they're smaller islands. They're swimming across that river to get there.
Yeah, they have to.
Yeah, they have to.
Yep.
But for the most part, the best buck bedding I find in water is in shallow water that's like a foot deep and has brush growing in it, but has a dry hump out in the water in thick cover, where you have to slosh to get up to them, or it's in cattails in water, or some sort of brush dogwood in water. Maybe it's only 2 inches of water, but it's the underneath that water is like a watery muck. And
Yeah.
you pull your boot out, you're making lots of noise. That's the kind of stuff they love. And you just find that like people just stop when they hit water for whatever reason. I mean, you got rubber boots and they don't walk through 3 inches of water.
Mm-hmm.
But the isolated little thick brushy spots isolated in water, oh my, those are the best spots for giant bucks by far. At least around here. I mean, you get out by you, obviously not because you're in hill country.
Right, we don't have water.
But swampy stuff, swampy flatland, any kind of flatland, when you can get isolated watery spots like that,
Mm-hmm.
you'll find giant bugs.
Tony had a question. He says I have a 1 mile section I hunt that is almost all ag. I guess that's what AG stands for. But between fields, there are thick cedar tree lines in a tic-tac-toe pattern all through it. It has big bucks every year. So do I scout every inch of it?
Oh, geez. I don't know. There's probably something in there that that's holding those bucks. I'm assuming he's talking about flatland. And if
You would
he
think
is,
so.
I'm going to tell you in flatland, look at the highest and the lowest elevations. Now, it's not going to be by much, right? It's going to be 10 feet higher, you know what I mean? Or swell, right? But they'll bed in the lowest elevations and the highest elevations. Not necessarily right on the top, but they're going to be near the top, right? And they'll be in those tree lines. They're going to put the window back and they're going to watch openings. And they will also be in spots along those tree lines where you're not going to expect, like close to where you go in, watching where you access, watching where people access from. They like to set up in that type of scenario where they're watching you. They're still going to have the wind to the back. They're going to want to be in those trees just slightly, in those cedar trees, looking out, watching where you walk in. Or they're going to be, those highest and lowest elevations usually. Or if you see a really thick spot in the tree line, obviously, or some sort of shape of a point or something coming out of it.
Yeah. Billy was asking about Kansas. He said, do you prefer hunting the WEHA properties or the State and Wildlife Refuge? WEHA is like I don't know what the acronym is, but it's like private land that the
I know
state.
it is, yeah. We has the walk-in private land stuff that gives you access, and there's a lot of it there. I hunted both. I don't know that I like the state park stuff better, or like the public land stuff better. It seemed like a lot of people didn't mess with the WEHAs. They went straight to the public land stuff, so there's more pressure there. But with that said, I did run into pretty damn big buck on that public land stuff. For those that watched the videos, that's where I hunted over that river, where I put the stand like a foot off the ground. That was the public land. But I kind of like the WEHAs. I really do. And it was interesting because if the WEHAs looked great, if the property looked like, oh, this property is going to hold bucks, there would definitely be guys there and footprints everywhere and no deer. If it looked like crap and you're like, how the hell would I even hunt that? I'm skipping over that. That's the spots you want to be. That's where we found the bigger stuff. So it's, but the WEHAs were really good spots. I think if I went down there again, I definitely wouldn't want to be around down around Rut, because there's a million people everywhere. It's crazy. I would rather do early season probably, because I think that those deer are still going to be on those WEHAs and they're going to be forcing those tree lines out of the cornfields and stuff that surround them, and use them like funnels, feel safe in there with no pressure. So.
Yeah. One thing about WEHAs is a lot of times they don't open until deer season. So we went down there during the spring to scout a bunch of them. We got there and you weren't allowed to get on them.
Awesome.
Yeah. Just a little tip. Walk-in hunting area is what it's called. Weehaw.
Mm-hmm. Weehaw is what we used to do on motorcycles when we were kids. Weehaw. Okay, that's stupid, right?
Bad joke. Oh, man. I got to the end of all the questions. During my workshop, speaking of scouting, during my workshop.
Now with your voice, man.
Do what? Can you hear me?
Now I can.
Oh. We got to the end of all the questions. We'll sit here for a second or two. But did you? Is there any more spots open for workshops while we're talking about scouting today?
Yeah, the first Sunday has openings.
Okay.
Otherwise, they're all full.
Yeah, a couple people were asking about scouting certain marshes and where you were going to be. I don't know if that's something you can tell or say or.
No, I'm not going to say exactly where I'm scouting. No.
Okay.
But I am planning on probably scouting one of the private channel members' properties. Maybe more than one, depending on time, but at least one. Me and Eric will go scout it. So,
yeah.
And then we'll film that. But I kind of like doing that, and absolutely free. Just go visit the guy and hang out and scout his property, and
Yeah. I think we got to all the questions. I tried to answer some of them as we were going. I know we. I think we got through everything. Get out and scout.
Get out and scout.
It's that time of year. You guys are kind of blessed this year too, without that snow up there. Usually, sometimes you guys got a bunch of snow. You don't.
See, we could have just skipped this whole thing, and we could just have me on here for 10 seconds to get out and scout.
Yep. Get in the woods. All right, everybody. Thanks for hopping on tonight. We'll talk at you later.
See ya.